Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. It is Thursday night, so it is time to talk about the Seattle Seahawks again. And we've got to get it right. We've got to right the ship. This is a great opportunity to do so this week. And we're going to talk about exactly how we right this ship. So I am Brendan, and I am joined, as I am a couple times a week, by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
Phenomenal, my friend. Phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we've got a game coming up this Sunday. It's a bit of a season saver, I would say, at this point. This is kind of a must win game if you want to achieve what you thought you were going to achieve a couple weeks ago, especially with your opponent being in the situation that they are in. So let's definitely open things up there, but we should lead off with a little bit of Seahawks news that we got this week. So it seems like we're collecting former first round picks that didn't quite work out in their original landing spot, Laquan Treadwell. And now, brand new Seahawk, we have Jonathan Abram, safety drafted by the, at the time, Oakland Raiders. First round pick, number 27 overall. Had some good statistical seasons, but ultimately they let him go earlier this year. Then he spent a couple weeks in Green Bay and now we're picking him up. So what do you think of Abram?
I think this is certainly, to your point on this, has been a recent trend with Schneider. We all remember his fascination with the 2013 first round draft and how many of those guys ended up on our roster. So he's had a penchant in the past to go for former first round picks. And I think that there's actually some real sound logic within that because players can wash out at their first stop for a variety of reasons. They could be immature and just not ready to fully be a pro. It could be that they're in the wrong landing space as far as the right people to develop them. It could be that they're in the wrong landing space as far as the scheme and what they're being asked to do within that scheme. And so the guys fail for a lot of different reasons other than they're just purely busts or they're just purely bad. And I don't know this is the case where that is what's going on with him. He's had now two stops. So obviously you go a little bit less into the place of saying, well, it's because he's in the wrong scheme or he's not getting coached right. But I do also believe that this is a move that's a little more interesting to me, Brendan. I tend to, in the past, we talked about these kind of moves I sort of check out on because I look at them as roster fodder, where you have them for, situations. I posted my video as I had him in case of glass, in case of emergency break glass kind of thing, as far as I view some of these guys where it's like, well, you're not going to likely see him on the field. So what's the point of talking about him? In his case, though, this is a little different, I think. He is a guy that's going to struggle in coverage. There's no doubt about that. The coverage numbers are bad. They're bad all the way around. He's like first last year, I think, among safeties in the amount of yards and receptions he gave up, and that was in his best year with the Raiders, at least from a PFF standpoint of things. So that part's bad, but then you have to look at what's going on with this defense right now, which is that we cannot stop the run at times. When teams this year have consistently said we're going to just stay with the run, it might be good, it might be bad early on, but we're going to stay with it throughout the whole course of the game. They've been able to break your defenses back. And it's also opened a lot of things in the pass game because now your defense has got guys, for instance, linebackers taking an extra step or two forward to try to accommodate stopping that run game that's just, gouging them. So this is a guy who is a good tackler, who is a good run defender. It's a guy that if you put him up in the box and have him do a lot of things you were going to actually ask Jamal Adams to do, this guy's got some things within that he might be able to do. They asked him to blitz and he could blitz reasonably well. He's got short area quickness and burst and some speed, and he can hit and tackle. Those aren't usually two combinations that you get that go together with each other. So I'm a little more higher on this move as far as some hopefulness with it. It's also built in, though, to understanding, Brendan, we got elbow and shoulder stuff going on with Ryan Neal. Josh Jones really, I think, has shown that he's got some tackling issues going on here that I don't think are going to go away anytime soon.
Right. Yeah. I went back and looked at some of the scouting reports on Abram when he came out of college, and they were very accurate. All the scouting reports were like this guy's, he can play like another linebacker. Sometimes he's a hard hitter. He's got this big, strong personality. He's a bigger guy. He's got a lot of upper body strength, but he can't cover. He's not smooth in his coverage. He's not smooth in the way he changes space in space, and that has basically been what he's been as a pro. So those scouting reports look like they were right on the money. And the stuff you said about him comparing well to Jamal Adams is also definitely true. So I was definitely happy about the signing. I'm not going to say excited because at the end of the day, if all things go according to plan, he's going to be a backup. But I do see where this guy at least has some positive attributes, unlike Josh Jones, who wasn't really good at anything. He was just kind of there. So having a guy who can be plus, maybe even plus in a couple of areas is a benefit, I think.
Definitely. And if it's somehow maybe you can manage between Jones, I think has some reasonable coverage ability, but it's a little like Austin Blythe on the other side of the ball from the center position. Like Blythe can pass protect like a mofo, but you ask that guy to start moving people off the ball and it ain't happening. And so maybe we have a little bit of the inverse of that with the safety position between the two guys, and you can find a way to interchange them a bit, like they have, I think, with Ryan Neal and Jones, because they found a way to get both those guys on the field at one time to take advantage of one skill versus the other guy and what he's able to do. But yeah, I do think Jamal Adams stuff can maybe open up a little bit more with him if they want to get a little more blitz heavy and start taking some more risks and stuff. This gives you a guy who has that in his skill set to do it. I've seen it on the tape with him, and he's got that same Jamal Adams quick 0 to kind of 50 kind of thing where he can really get up to top flight speed fast, which helps you in the blitz game. And certainly that's something, as you look at this team right now, there's not a lot of adjustments to be made as far as you're not fixing the defensive line right now, Brendan. You're not fixing the middle linebacker position right now. Maybe something you can do is manufacture, though, some help for this defense. And that would come via pressure and blitzing. And maybe he can give you a little bit more of a guy to do that. On top of giving you the insurance if Josh Jones just can't roll, if Ryan Neal isn't able to, come back through.
For whatever it's worth, Ryan Neal was a full participant in practice today, which is an encouraging sign. The only other thing going on with this team right now, and speaking of practice today, we've got some sort of illness floating around the locker room. Have you seen this?
Oh no, is this what the same thing was hitting Abraham Lucas last week, I'm guessing?
Yeah, we've got, let's see, the following guys missed practice with an illness: Damian Lewis, Travis Homer, Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Brooks, Josh Jones, Tony Jones, Miles Adams, and Marquise Goodwin.
It's a lot of names. And that's probably just the guys that just missed it. There's probably a lot of guys just trying to gut it out.
Yes, Phil Haynes and Al Woods were listed with an illness but participated.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So that's bad timing on that one, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I feel like when it comes to illnesses, when it comes to a professional athlete, they're able to do things to push it out of their body quickly. So it tends to be something that they're able to overcome in a couple of days and get back out on the field. So at least that's going on.
Well, they're throwing them all those C packs, and they're throwing them every little bit of thing that can push it, get them back to front on that as well. But I do think it affected Lucas last week, trying to fight through it as he did. It is good, at least here on there's some starters on that list you mentioned, but some guys that aren't necessarily the absolute starters. So hopefully we got enough guys on deck here that aren't vomiting and having
the bye week. The bye week came 2 weeks too early.
Yeah, I guess it did. Goodness.
Yeah. So that's about it in terms of midweek news. Jonathan Abram is not insignificant, but
no.
The hope is that he never actually has to start for us. The hope is that he plays a handful of snaps and that's it. I would be interested to know why he left Green Bay so quickly, though. I wonder what happened there. Do you have any idea what that could have been?
Could be just a poor. I'd heard comments about it being a poor fit for him. I don't know about the first Oakland stop. I mean, I think he was there for some of Gus Bradley's time, so he was doing probably a lot of the stuff, really box safety stuff. But I don't know what I'm not as fluent in the Packers defense because they just changed that somewhat recently, and I haven't had a reason to look deep at him too much. The one thing I'll say though is, of course, Schneider does have connections to the Packers, and I do have to wonder if not him making this move to then bring the guy aboard is him also maybe talking to the Packers about that very kind of situation, going, all right, you guys just released him after you just picked him up. I'm kind of interested in him. What are you saying? I think Schneider's got, I think general managers of the league have some of those relationships interchangeably between organizations. And I think he probably has those guys learns going, okay, what, was it just bad scheme fit? Is there, well, he just didn't work for us, but if you put him in position A, B, C, D, he could maybe be okay for you. And that's, I think that there's maybe I might be kind of overselling it a little bit with this, but that's, a little bit of where I saw it with it.
I can dig that. That's probably the best case scenario for us going into this, going into whatever's left of the rest of the season with him, that it was something like that, because it was a very short stint he had in Green Bay. I looked it up. He played one snap across 2 weeks and then he was out of there.
Yeah. There certainly it didn't take them too long. And you're not when you come in those organizations, they'll not often, Brendan, have that long. There's the rope. If you step out of line, you don't toe the line. They'll let you go quickly on that. You don't have the benefit of the doubt like you do being a first round pick with the Raiders. So some of this could be maturation process and that too. I mean, well, we'll see. But it's also you're giving no cost up. You like these moves because it's low cost, high reward. If it doesn't flame out, doesn't cost you anything. To bring him in here doesn't no draft pick, no loss of compensatory pick. It's all just bottom end, low end salary essentially on the time you bring him in to see what he is.
Right. And with that, I guess it's just time to turn things over to this upcoming game on Sunday. We're going back to LA. We've been there once this year. We've been in that stadium once this year.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got this Rams team that there is not a lot that reminds you of the team that won the Super Bowl last year, is there?
No, it's kind of in shambles right now.
Yeah, they don't have their quarterback, their running backs, their receivers, most of their offensive line, their defensive line. I mean, the only thing they've still really got is Jalen Ramsey. And to my eye, although PFF greatly disagrees with me, Ramsey's not really been that good this year. So there's the only thing really left from that Super Bowl team feels like it's Sean McVay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Leonard Floyd on the outside on defense. That's
He's
another
not
guy's.
doing much though.
He's not doing a lot, but he's there.
Yeah.
he's at least I guess there. But certainly the most important parts: Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Noah Whitworth, who retired. You mentioned the running back. They're going to be down Note Bloom as well, another very good, I believe, guard for them. There it's Ashawn Robinson's out. That's an important defensive lineman for them. So it's Brendan, we've gotten the benefit this year of our Seahawks of coming into these games and going up against some opponents that are very undermanned. And it's, I think, has indeed helped us in some of these games where if Detroit has Amon St. Brown, do you win that game? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. There's a couple of those games, a few of these players you add into the mix on them where, San Diego comes in that game and they've got both the receivers, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Can you win that game? I don't know. Maybe, probably, but I think it makes it harder. It's not just a matter of one injury though. You've got these teams, Brendan, I think you would agree that you've had multiple injuries too. You had the Saints game where you're coming in with Jarvis Landry and Mike Thomas bolt down, and then Olave gets injured in like the second quarter. And you still couldn't quite put that team down. And so sometimes you've taken advantage, sometimes you haven't. What I'm trying to say with this is that this is the greatest representation of having a team undermanned that we have faced this year in a year of facing a lot of undermanned teams as far as their injury situations are concerned. They're down so many guys across the board. Most of the time we do a breakdown here, Brendan, and we'll talk a little bit about the X's and O's here. But most of the time we do that is the breakdown on the matchups. How are the matchups going to work? How do we deal with this guy? How do they deal with our guy? This is really more of a matchup of you just taking care of business and doing what you should do. This is a team that's lost 5 straight football games. They've got the second worst point differential in the entire NFL right now. Everything here says to you, this is a team that's hobbled, that's dying, that's bleeding out. Just put the last bit to bed on them. You know what I mean? And that's so it really to me goes even beyond from a schematic approach here. It's that come in here motivated to win this game, come in here giving your all against their all. Your all is more talented and better, and you're going to win this game.
Right. So let's talk about what they have because I think there might be a lot of people out there who don't even know what they're going with right now because all their guys have hit the IR. I know McVay already said, there's a chance we shut down Stafford, Kupp, and Donald for the whole year. And honestly, with the way they're playing, I expect them to do all that kind of because they're about to have nothing to play for.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I don't, if I was in that position, I would do the same thing if I was them. As much as they've gone all in on this year, there's no light at the end of this current tunnel for this season. The injury situation is not necessarily on point to getting better. And with Stafford, you have to wonder if there's not a couple of things going on with him. Remember, there was an elbow he was dealing with in the preseason. It could be just best to just get him that, rest, and especially for a guy that's as old as he's getting now.
Yeah. So let's start with the quarterback position because I'm not 100% sure who we're even getting here. We've got no Stafford, so you've got Perkins. I think it's a Bryce Perkins. And you've got John Wolford. And Perkins has been playing lately, but I think Wolford might be back from his injury. So do you have anything to say about either of these guys for the very little bit we've been able to watch them play?
Not a lot with Perkins. I don't have really even a read with him. He's got, 34 attempts. He hasn't done a lot. He hasn't shown any kind of skill that would be fearful or like we got to worry for this. Wolford's a little more, I guess, interesting in the respect of he's a guy that can use his legs. So, he can definitely do a little more mobility things than Stafford can. And if you have an offense like they're set up to be that is held back in their production because they don't have their main thoroughbreds out there to run, instead they just got their donkeys out there. Well, then having a quarterback that can kind of move around a little bit and get you some extra yards on the ground from time to time, or even really use that as his skill through the game because he's got nothing to lose by leaning on his legs, right? He's trying to earn his way and show that he's worthy of being a guy that can be like a Taylor Heineke
Mhm.
in this league. So I would say that he's more difficult to deal with than Perkins, but he certainly is a big step down from what you're dealing with in Stafford overall.
Right. Yeah, I was watching a little bit of the Rams play the last couple of weeks with Perkins out there. And I've said this about a couple other quarterbacks, but it really does look like the punter got put in a quarterback. It doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look confident back there. It looks like a punter. That's the
Yeah.
best way I can put it. And Wolford, I know Wolford's pretty mobile. I was actually a guy that I was looking at as maybe picking up as a backup last year. I remember I briefly touched on that idea. So Wolford probably a little more dangerous. I agree. I don't know what the QB decision is going to be over there. Either way, obviously, it's not great. But yeah, I think I'm with you. Wolford's probably just a little more dangerous.
Yeah, I think the mobility aspect of it, because you just don't trust Perkins is going to slice and dice you, even if he's feeling good. You're not going to get taken by a third string back. But a guy that can move around with his legs can manufacture things. You can get through pressure. He can get the yards on the ground that they're not able to get other ways. It's a key third down scramble. It's going to be interesting to see if we even try maybe not having to worry as much about the edge guys, especially like we did last week with Devontae Adams, where we can maybe put a spy at the linebacker position on the QB in this one and go, okay, let's move that. Let's force him to pass in this one. Let's see if Wolford's really got the arm to take us apart here, because we don't think he will, and that might be an approach they take.
Part of the reason why you did draft Jordan Brooks when you drafted him, you were like, okay, we're going to have to deal with Kyler Murray. You didn't, well, you actually did kind of know this at the time, Trey Lance, and you were like, okay, we need a guy who can QB spy. I think that was part of the impetus behind taking Jordan Brooks because that's what he did in college. So good opportunity for him to maybe earn some of that money.
Yeah, this would be helpful. I mean, this is a way because I don't think that you ask him to sit back there and just be a pocket quarterback and cut you a butt. He's not going to do it. And they especially don't have the line right now that's going to hold up for him to be able to be successful with that either in pass protection. So that all to me leans back to don't give him don't give him a backdoor exit here. Don't give him a way out, emergency exit. Essentially, close that exit off and force him another way. But I don't know if the team's likely to do it, Brendan, because they've made such a kerfuffle about double teaming Devontae Adams last week and how that harmed them in the run game from that standpoint of things. So it's probably not the type of game they're going to do that with, coming on the heels of what happened last week.
Right. Running back. Okay, this is another area where it's hard to know exactly what they're doing because they released,
It's a good way of putting it.
yeah, they released Daryl Henderson, right?
Yeah.
He was their leading rusher, and they still let him go. That's how little they thought of him.
Yeah.
They hate Cam Akers still, I guess. So I think their number one running back is the Notre Dame kid, Kyron Williams. I remember scouting him a little bit. Excellent blocker, excellent blitz picker upper, but not really much of anything else that I saw. He's like super slow. Do you remember anything about Kyron Williams from the last draft?
I'd have to check my scouting report, but I think I remember him just fitting into that grouping of how it was where that greatest grouping of the backs were in that last draft, where it was really that tier 3 area where you were, late third to like the late sixth. You had the most of the guys at running back position, just a ton of them, and he was in that grouping. Good hard runner, I think, but nothing about him stood out that I thought was to as a difference maker or something that you'd fear, like speed or tackle breaking or hard to bring down. None of that. So he's good in those areas, but nothing dangerous.
Yeah, the area where things have really fallen apart, I think maybe more than any other position for the Rams, is at receiver. So Robert Woods moved on last offseason after
Mm,
tearing his ACL. Odell, not back. No Cooper Cup. Allen Robinson now out. So many of the guys that they were building or planning to build their offense around are just not going to be there. So according to PFF, their top receivers right now are Van Jefferson, a guy I have never heard of before named McCutcheon, and another guy I've never heard of before named Powell. And they also have Skoronik, who is actually playing. I don't know if they're doing this now, but I remember earlier this year they were lining him up at fullback. Just kind of an experiment they were doing, and it actually was working. It was actually pretty cool. But yeah, they are down to the nub at receiver. So I guess the guy they're going to look to right now is Van Jefferson because he was I think, second round pick.
He was. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of Van Jefferson? He hasn't done a ton yet, but he had a pretty good year, I think, last year.
The deal with him coming out was that the claim to fame was he was one of the most pro ready receivers. He's like the ultimate. You're getting the guy at his floor and ceiling kind of almost instantaneously, right? Like he's going to be there, but you're not getting any higher. And I think the Rams have been kind of patient with him to come along, and he's given him moments and blips. He's a really good route runner. He has, I think, a background, was one of those guys that I think father or uncle was a pro NFL player. So he has a lot of background and refinement prior to getting the NFL. That's part of how come his floor was high when he got here. He's not a guy that's going to burn you, but he is a good route runner. He has good hands. He can do everything pretty well across the board. He's been injured, I think, a lot of this year, which is why you don't have much production out of him this season, as I think for the majority of the year he's been out. But he is still a guy with some talent he's not just, a guy out there. If you're talking like last week, we dealt with that guy Hollins of the Raiders who get caught up. He's better than Hollins of the Raiders, and I thought his second round's a little high for him at the time, though, Brendan. I thought him of more of his like fourth round kind of receiver at the time. I did think I thought they went a little bit high on that one. Because you're drafting him at that point for the guy that's just what he is. Where if you're going in the second round, to me, I want to go for more of a ceiling guy. And he's a guy with this low ass ceiling. And you go, well, why it seems that's a little bit like what our drafting approach was when you applied it to LJ Collier. It's like, well, okay, yeah, he's got this heavy hands and stuff but there's no ceiling here. Don't you, when you want to go first or second round, be going for the guy that's going to have that, at least somewhat potential that goes beyond just maybe being a league average starter player. And I do think that's probably Jefferson's top end is this, PFF guy. He'd be a 65 guy if you put him as your number 2 throughout the course of the year, which, it's fine. Like a poor man's Christian Kirk, I suppose.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking at it right now. These other guys they have at the top of their depth chart, McCutcheon and Powell, have barely played. So these are guys who are basically getting pushed into action because of all the injuries.
So we're not going to get any poo-poo Atwell?
I'm not seeing him. I guess we will see some, but he's not even listed here on the PFF chart. So maybe, he's good for one big catch every year and a half, I guess. So maybe he'll make one.
I suppose so. Both him and Eskridge, both those two back-to-back picks in the second round.
They're very similar too. A lot in common, those two guys. Yeah. It seems like small, fast, ultimately just not built for football.
Yeah, agreed. It's the size does matter to a degree in football to some degree. You get some small guys out there, but if you're going to small, you better at least be a speed burner like Deshaun Jackson was, where you're just so much faster than everybody else. It's undeniable, or you have to have some sort of special skill. And neither of those two guys really have much of any kind of special skills they bring beyond being kind of quick and fast.
Here's one guy that we can recall from their Super Bowl team that was part of that. Tyler Higbee. He's still there. Oh, yeah. He's like the last holdout on that offense.
He's a functional tight end.
Him and Havenstein are the only two holdouts from that Super Bowl team, and it took less than a year.
Yeah, they chopped the block quick, especially impressive because they didn't have draft picks to turn it over. So, but it shows you when you get to the Super Bowl, or be it lose the Super Bowl, what a price and toll it can kind of take on you, especially as a team like that had gone to the playoffs a lot of years prior. You end up having a 4-year period where you've almost stacked up a whole nother season worth of games onto the postseason to what you've done to the regular season. And I think that does add up as a toll. They said Aaron Donald, this is the first game that he's missed in his career. And you go, gosh, that's a lot of games, man. He's been in this league for a long time to play every single game.
Yeah. I think that's got to be one of the more amazing stats. The way Aaron Donald plays, for him to never miss a game to injury.
Yeah.
That seems almost impossible. You think eventually at some point when you're down on the line of scrimmage every play like that, you'd
Yeah.
eventually just have something weird happen.
Just merely by some team at some point choosing just from this basis alone, right? You could say the normal action that happens, but what
Mhm.
about the moment where a team wants to like target you? You're like, this guy's killing us, which like I don't advocate for people doing that, but teams we know do it. And no
Oh
team's
yeah.
been able to knock him out even doing that. Like, we're going to go after his ankle on this play, or we're going to just have you take him up high and I'm going to go low. And he's still, yes, I agree with you. I think it is in a lot of ways probably more impressive even than what Favre did as a quarterback, because the quarterbacks, even back in Favre's days, had not the same protections, but at least some kind of protections back there versus um, defense tackles who have no protections.
Right. Um, and another huge problem area for this Rams team would be their offensive line. Like you said, Whitworth retired. Note Boom tore his ACL like a month and a half ago. Still not back, obviously.
Yeah.
Brian Allen, I guess, is still out. I thought he was going to come back eventually, but now I'm starting to think maybe they're just done with him for this year because their team is done anyway. But they've got a real makeshift offensive line here. I'm looking at it. Havenstein is playing right tackle, which is obviously where he needs to stay. He's actually playing
Yeah.
fairly well. But the guy they got replacing Noteboom seems to be a train wreck. Arcuri. They have some interior linemen who are pretty lackluster, like well below average at best. Skura, Shelton, and Abushi. And yeah, it's
Ode
just
Ibushi, the old
is it
Seahawk.
Ode Abushi? Yeah, that's who they have listed right now. Yes, Ode Abushi is the starting right guard for the
How
Rams.
about that guy? He's been able to just kick around the league for so many years. How about
Yeah,
that? He's been in the league like 10 years or something. So, hell yeah.
yes.
No, you got a
And
lot. Sorry, go ahead.
and just real quick, I mean, you've seen some of these games, like the Niners. When the Niners played the Rams, like Stafford was just getting snowed under every other snap. So it's been a big problem.
Yeah, well, those are a lot. Allen, Havestein, Whitworth. Those are three of their most important offensive linemen on that Super Bowl team, bar none. Note Bloom would be their number four. So you got 4/5 of the Super Bowl offensive line gone, of the best parts of that line. And you're a year later, they don't have the draft capital. They haven't had the draft capital recently, as good as they've done in the later round picks. They've not had enough of an arsenal of that, especially with the limitations to spend monetarily speaking, to be able to reinforce the ranks as far as depth goes. It's why I've said on this, it's beyond, there's other positional groupings we're going to take a look at here, but this is why this is really about a game of you just executing who you are and what you are. You don't even have to play. It doesn't take perfect football in this game. It's not going to take even moderately decent football in this game, and you're going to beat this Rams team with how weakened they are. We are looking at, I think, in a lot of regards, Brendan, right now, a team that with where they're at coming into this game, you're playing a team right with the Texans as far as how bad they are coming into this game and where their roster is at coming into this game.
Right. And look, I mean, we didn't play a great offensive line last week against the Raiders, and we still couldn't get anything going against that front.
Mm.
Honestly, the Bucks offensive line is not playing that well this year, but they looked like a bunch of world beaters against us. So how much confidence do you have that we're going to be able to take advantage of this offensive line?
Well, I think the Raiders' offensive line's not been great throughout the year, but they've been okay. I mean, that team's been in every single game that they've played in. And the Buccaneers do have Donovan Smith and Trent Wirfs, as we've learned this year. Even if you have weaknesses on the interior part of your line, if you've got your guys playing on the outside in a particular game, the tackles playing well, run, pass blocking, both, that can be enough. Kind of can carry a day almost on itself. I think this is a whole nother different type of situation, though. That's, even last week you had Colton Miller, who did play for the Raiders, who is one of the better linemen in the league, probably, or at least probably a Pro Bowl level lineman for them. Minimum, that is what they had on that line. This team, Rams, don't even have that. So, as I said, we've had teams that we faced that have been in weakened states, and some that we've taken advantage of, some that we haven't. But we've not had a team in this much of a weakened state, this much of a deprived point from as far as their starters go. And it's a point beyond reckoning to me, Brendan, where there's really no excuses here where it's like, well, yeah, but we just don't have a good enough line. Like, those guys should be able to take advantage of these guys. This should be a game you're coming away with 5 or 6 sacks. If the Rams, you can't stop, that is if you can stop the run, which will be the big part of this a little bit, because they're going to want to be
Yeah.
happy to run with the Walford all day if they can get away with it, I'm sure.
If you can't stop the run when it's led by a guy like Kyron Williams, who I think ran like a 4.74,
Yeah.
you've hit a new low. That is a new low. Like, I'm not a Leonard Fournette fan, but he's certainly, better than Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs, obviously one of the best running backs in the league. But if you let a running game led by Kyron Williams and John Wolford destroy you, then that is a different level. Like you said, I agree.
Yeah. And there's no the Tampa Bay's excuses were that you brought in the Miles Adams and you sat Bowman and you thought you were going to run those 5-man fronts and have a lot of more passing with Tampa Bay. Then last week the excuse was, well, we had to dedicate resources to Devontae Adams, and then that just totally destroyed. I got to ask your opinion on this, but to hear this is kind of the narrative coming out of that game from the coaching staff a little bit that, well, we had to double Devontae Adams, and then that totally messed up all of our run fits. And I can kind of get that to a small degree, but I feel like there's been teams in past history that have been able to take away one player on a team and not have it completely just open the barn door up on the other side of things. I know there's some of that susceptibility that you have at play, but it seemed like that was a little bit overwrought, I thought, coming on the end of that game.
I mean, my thing is, we did a great job against the run for the first 20 minutes of that game. There was no problem. Josh Jacobs was 2 yards in a cloud of dust. And then after the 30-yard run, after the Geno interception, that's when the floodgates opened. So I'm looking at those first 20 minutes like you were doing totally fine. Everything was going great. Everything was going the way it was supposed to. And then as the game went on, maybe you wore down a little bit. I think to me, I have to suspect that's a bigger factor than just, we were double teaming one guy.
Yeah. Agreed on that.
So I'm not a big fan of that. I don't buy it. I'm sure it's part of it. Everything is connected on an NFL field, but I'm not buying it to the extent that I think some people would want us to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But basically to just kind of close the door on this Rams offense, just to give you an idea, they were one of the worst offenses in the league before Stafford got hurt, Kupp got hurt, Allen Robinson got hurt, Darrell Henderson got released. Like, they were bottom 5 with those guys.
Yeah.
So this might be the worst offense in the league at this moment. Who would be worse? Are they worse than Denver right now?
I mean, Texans are worse offensively than them, I would say. And Denver's worse than them offensively. I think Denver's has almost just about historically bad, but not maybe past those two teams. I can't think of another one that would jump out to me that would be, as bad. And I think that it's coming off a Super Bowl year and guys being a little more beat up, and you're losing Whitworth, who left tackles we've seen with Charles Cross and what he's done just coming in with his injection. They make a huge difference on offenses. And as we talked about before with this, they kind of coupled the problem, because initially they moved Havistan to left. It's nice here they got him back at right, but the problem started off when you're moving him to left, and now he's not good at left, and now you've messed up your right tackle situation. Now you got some more injuries. You don't fill in for Robert Woods, who is a really underrated player for them, not just because he was a receiver. It was for his blocking. It was for all the things he could do that would be required in that offense. But they require a lot from their receivers in that offense. You're not just doing typical wide receiver things. There's a lot of blocking defensive ends and linebackers and all that. So they're missing his presence. They've not been able to replace it. Same thing with Odell Beckham, who definitely, at least helped them out a bit in that stretch run last year. I think he even had a catch in the Super Bowl for a touchdown, a couple catches in that before he went down. So that you end up losing and going down 8-9 guys, man. You're gonna be significantly worse, and you're gonna be one of the worst offenses in the league. And it isn't surprising with that. I do think, though, Brendan, it does come down to a little bit of some conceptual things in this game too. It's you taking care of things, but it's first, can you stop the run? Because they're going to do what these other teams have done for this blueprint. They're rolling that blueprint out on the table, and they're, okay, here's your Seahawks team defense. Here's what you do. You just hit them in the running game through 4 quarters, and eventually they'll break by the 4th quarter. And that's the blueprint for success on this defense. And so you said 20 minutes. Can you keep that push from beyond 20 minutes? Can you get even 3 quarters of just good, solid run defense, even if there's 1 quarter where things kind of backslide? And then the second part, Brendan, and this is a big part with McVay, because he has hammered this on Carroll year after year after year recently in the offensive side of the ball. And that is the flood zone concepts. That is the running 2 men through a zone. First man runs especially the linebackers, runs the linebacker out of the zone deep. Then you run a guy back underneath it. And the crossing routes where you'll run a 9 route to one side of the field, and that runs the corner off. Then you run a crossing route underneath it, and it's wide open. The flood zone concepts work in a lot of different ways here with McVay, but he hasn't beat us offensively, Brendan, because he's doing a lot of stylistic things, oh, we're going to bubble screens and we're going to run this and we're going to run that. We're going to be all the here, and you're never going to know what you're hitting with. They have the look of complexity, but it's actually a lot of simplicity within their complexity. It's just that he knows he can hit you with that because you haven't had the adjustment and the turn defensively to combat that, because it's something that will just, obviously a flood zone concept is going to go after his own defense, right? Because it's not a guy playing man on man. It's a guy dropping to a spot. He's looking to pick somebody up. Here comes a guy. His instincts are to pick that guy up in coverage. Second he does, he's going to want to stay with that guy, but then he leaves his zone, and then another player comes in and enters that zone after he vacates it. And so it's very simple conceptually. It challenges those zone defenders, especially guys like Jordan Brooks who struggle in zone defense. But that's going to be the secondary key for me in this game as far as how we deal with this offense.
Yeah, and one thing I have pointed out recently is that the last several times we played the Rams, it seemed like we were starting to figure something out. These last handful of times, the defense has played anywhere from okay to excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like we were starting to maybe solve some of that. And now this is a Rams offense in its most depleted and pathetic form. Like last year, played them twice. That first game, we had them down at 3 points most of the way through the third quarter, and our offense kept going 3 and out. Eventually things broke. Now, there were some bad moments in that game. Like I remember there was one tweet thread right after that game of like, the Rams are running the same play over and over and over again, and the Seahawks can't stop it. And then they showed like the video of like them running the same play over and over and over, and every time we couldn't get anything going against it. But that game was not bad. The game in LA last year, the defense played really good, and the offense just couldn't support them at all. Going back into 2020, I thought our defense played fine in all 3 games against the Rams. At least they played okay, well enough to win the game. So it seemed like we were starting to figure something out, but like this defense is having problems that previous Seahawks defenses the last couple of years didn't necessarily have. So going to be kind of interesting to see how they respond to that.
Agreed. I think it could be also the benefit of with this too. The 3-4 defense might aid this a little bit more along versus the 4-3 you've run in the past, which seems like that's been something that's been a little bit easier for McVay to go after.
Right. So, yeah, that's basically all I can say about the Rams offense. Quick little detour from the topic of this Rams game. So, officially, our pick has moved up to number 3 because the Bills winning tonight altered the Rams' strength of schedule slightly. Now we own number 3 by 0.001 strength of schedule points.
Well, the ESPN Power Index thing, of course, has us projected at even, I think, number 2 when it's all said and done. I still do maintain, as I have now for a while, that we're going to be locked into probably that third spot minimum, with a decent possibility to get to number 2 when you look at the schedule. Some of it is going to, of course, hinge on where that Broncos-Rams game goes down the road, I think. But a lot of it could be upended by that, where that doesn't matter because, like you just said, the strength of schedule ends up bearing it out anyway on the other side of it. And that would overrule that. I don't think that would overrule at that point, does it, Brendan? Because at that point, it does come down to their head-to-head scheduling on that, doesn't it?
Head-to-head has no bearing on where your draft picks go, apparently.
Wow.
Apparently, the only tiebreaker they use is strength of schedule.
Well, that could work in our favor because right now that looks like maybe one game with the Rams are this burdened by injury, where they're just a shell of themselves. Not they're a shell of themselves. They're like a flake of the shell. Then that would definitely be a game that I think at least Russ might be able to pull that one off. And so that's definitely one that's good to hear that if that's going to be the case.
Yeah. I do suspect that whoever wins that, whoever loses that game gets the number 2 pick, though. That feels the way we're going. Chicago might lose out because their remaining schedule is tough, but that's also boosted their strength of schedule up high enough to where they're probably not going to pick that high. So
that's good.
Doing the math, if Denver loses out, I think we're guaranteed the number 2. If they beat the Rams, I think it's going to be the number 3 or the number 4.
I think it's very important too, because I think in this case, there's a little bit of a difference between being at 2 and 3 versus 4, even though it's 1 pick difference, because you're talking about, I think at that point, the opportunity to be in that position to then move back to have the team that's quarterback hungry to go get that guy. If you're at 4, those teams will usually trade up into 1, 2, or 3 to get the quarterback that they're locked in on. You can still see trades coming up to 4. It's never been not done, I guess, but I think it's not quite as likely. You're not going to get as much pulling back at that point if you do want that as an option. And for me, that's my early kind of first,
Yeah.
go option, so to speak.
It feels like tier one this draft. Maybe I'm over exaggerating this. It feels like tier one is Stroud, Anderson, Carter.
Stroud, Anderson, Carter, I would go with that.
So
That's
you want that top three pick.
I might put Ringo in there too, but yes,
Ring. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more. Like, I don't think Murphy is tier one with those three guys. I like him a
no,
lot, but I don't think he is. I don't think Skoronowski is, although that might just be because I'm not looking at tackles because I know we don't need one.
yeah, I haven't. I'm not. I mean, I won't get around to looking at those guys until deep into the process. So if I look at them much at all, to be frank with you, because like, what's the point?
Yeah.
We're gonna have our two guys, Curhan and Stone, here as your swing guys in the future. I think so. Um, I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put much into that either. But I have heard he's one of those guys up there. I do agree with you. There's not. We're talking top five. We're talking those quintessential guys that'd be up the top who could be selected there. These are kind of your early, truly early cream of the crops.
Yeah, and just a real quick here, the Broncos do play the Ravens this week. That should be a pretty easy loss. So
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna. Hopefully, we don't have to sweat anything this week.
Ravens are coming off a loss too, so they should be
Hmm.
motivated, I believe.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So that's looking good. And real quick here, Ghost, thank you for the $1.99. Half the Seahawks roster is sick right now. Yeah, we mentioned that a little earlier. It's not great. But it makes sense, right? One guy in that facility has it, it's going to spread.
This does happen in football. It's a common thing that goes on at times. It sucks when it occurs, and this is the crappy time because we need this game. We can't punt this. And I'll say this as much we're talking about this Rams team, Brendan. Being in a position to where they are as weak as they are and as vulnerable as they are, which I think is completely the case. The other thing you got to kind of notice with them when you take a look at their schedule this year is that it hasn't exactly been tough, easy sailing for them. Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs, the San Francisco 49ers twice, the Dallas Cowboys. And then to me, if you look at it, Brendan, if we say there's three tiers of teams in the leagues, of bad teams, mid-grade teams, and high teams, those would be all high teams that are tough teams. And then they've had Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, and Arizona twice, and Tampa Bay, which at the very least are in kind of a middling kind of state, I would say. They've not played kind of a bottom of the barrel type team. They've truly had a first place schedule throughout the course of this season when I look at their, who they've gone up against from an opponent standpoint of things.
Yeah.
So if we're missing a lot of guys with flus and stuff and that offsets some of where they're dealing with, well,
Mm.
boy, this
How
game
about
might
how
get a little
about how
tighter.
about the Saints? They did lose to the Saints a couple weeks ago.
They did, but I look at the Saints as a 4-win team that's, I think, a little bit better than the 4 wins that they're at. I think that's a little bit with it because they've had so many injury situations of their own that they've dealt with. I don't think they're a good team, but I think the Saints will end up as a middling team. I think they'll end up with 7 or 8 wins. And I think
Okay.
if you look at some of the other teams, like let's go through let me give you for instance, Brendan. So like they've not gotten the opportunity to take on a Denver Bronco team, a Houston Texans team, a Steeler team, a Cleveland Brown team with Jacoby Brissett, a Chicago Bear team, a Green Bay Packer team, a Detroit Lion team, right? Like you kind of go down the list on some of those really like bottom of the barrel kind of teams that would be maybe in more of an opportunity for the win. They haven't had that on their schedule, and you don't when you're a Super Bowl winning team, you're going to get the tough schedule. So that's how this game works in the NFL. But it also is representative of the fact that it's not like they've completely just lost against people that across the board you're just like, how'd they lose that game? There's no way they should be like, well, that team's can be pretty tough depending on the week, this year. I think Saints and Falcons are those two type of teams where like, depending on the week you play them, they might be really kind of tough or you're catching them on the right week where they're not quite right there. We caught them
Makes
on a
sense.
tough week with both those two teams.
Right. Right. Makes sense. And I just checked. Both the starting interior linemen on the left side for the Rams have run block grades below 50 this year. So not only is this an offensive line bad, it seems like they're actually worse at run blocking than pass blocking. So there should be an opportunity there to heal your run game related woes in this one.
Get right game, right? Get right
Right.
on the run game.
Right. All right. So let's talk about the side of the ball that still has some talent left. It's the defense for these Rams. Our offense still playing really well. We're fourth in the league in points per game.
Mm-hmm.
And Obviously, we played well enough to win in that last game. Could have made another play at the end there to seal it, but didn't happen. But the offense is playing really good. So this defense, obviously, they're not playing great right now, and it doesn't figure to get any better because they are down probably the best defensive player of this generation in Aaron Donald. So in his absence, what can we say about these crop of defensive linemen they've got over there? And by the way, no Ashawn Robinson.
Well, I do think the Ashawn Robinson one hurts a bit because they like to at times have that, former UW Husky Greg Gaines out there with Ashawn, and then you could have Donald in there, and that gave you the two beefy guys around Donald to kind of let him do what he wants to do, eat up blocks and whatnot, and really do free up their linebackers. I do think Gaines is rounded out into a relatively solid, one tech kind of guy, or that you can do some zero tech things. I think he's been pretty good for them overall. But it's a team that doesn't have that pass rusher they had opposite Donald last year, where they're at their most lethal. Of course, they made that Von Miller trade halfway into the year, and when he came aboard with what they had with Miller and Leonard and Donald, that was kind of a fearsome front they could run at you then, along with these guys that were useful, like I'm talking about, the Ashawn Robinson and Greg Gaines mixed in there as well. But they're missing that now. You mentioned with Floyd, he's definitely having a bit of a down year. I don't know, he's ever been like a amazing for them, but he's okay. 5 sacks. He's still kind of a guy that you got to be a little bit worried about from the edge. He can provide some problems. I think Bobby Wagner's been quietly a pretty good addition for them. His Pro Football Focus scores are really, really high. Yeah. He's well into the 80s, 90 tackles again this year, 3 sacks, four tackles for loss. That part jumped out to me, Brendan. They got him really shooting some gaps there, because that was one of the things you and I noted a lot about, is like, where are the TFLs with Bobby in the last couple of years, and that's come back into at least a little bit of a portion here for them. 3 passes defensed as well. So, even a kick blocked. But Bobby's been pretty good to help them out in that middle. That's a part that's going to help in their run game. I do think a lot of what you have to do, Brendan, with this defense is, because they have that 4-eye in technique with those defensive ends, which can kind of muck stuff up inside. It then becomes a lot about, can you get to the outside and the edges with Kenneth Walker and be able to attack in the running game in that way? Because there's that natural leverage when you have your tackle here and you've got the defensive end shaded inside his shoulder, there's a natural leverage win for that tackle then on outside runs, right? If I run inside, the defensive end has the leverage. But if I go outside, my tackle's got the pin. He's got the pin block already kind of set up. So the key, though, then is that you got to get the second level blocks. You get the guys pulled in space to then create your alleyway for the other defenders that are going to come and help out and rally then at that point. That to me is, if we're going to have running game success in this one, Brendan, I don't know that we're going to do a lot going up the middle, even with their deficiencies with no Ashawn Robinson and no Donald. I do think still it'll come down to, can you get to the edges in the running game and do some damage in that respect on this defense, because that's where they're vulnerable. And that's when you look at the Niners, why they've had success, that paper, rock, scissors thing with us Niners and in recent years, and we beat the Niners beat Rams beat us, is because the Niners utilize that outside game as well as anybody in the league, right? That outside zone and the fly sweeps to Deebo Samuel, because it naturally attacks that 4 inside technique of those defensive ends.
All right. Just real quick note on Leonard Floyd, because you did mention him. He's another one of the guys they have that is still playing fairly well. He's on pace to have about 21 or 22 QB pressures this year. Last year he had 37, which is definitely, a big part of that is they don't have Donald playing as well, and they don't have Von Miller at all to help. So that gives you an idea of how much he's fallen off from last year. Leonard Floyd, that is. Still a pretty decent player, but yeah, you're right. And with the way our interior offensive line, especially that right side, is playing right now, it's hard to believe we can run the ball up the middle on anyone, honestly.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it does just kind of go a little bit beyond even them being lacking in talent. It's like, because of the injury situation, it's like, well, I know you're not going to move Gaines. I don't think Phil Haynes is going to move Gaines off the ball. And I don't think Austin Blythe doubling with Phil Haynes on Gaines at the point of attack is going to move him off the ball either. Maybe I'm just lacking in confidence in that position. That's the spot, though, and that's what Seattle likes to do. They want to run those inside A gap runs. That's the type of double team you're going to try to execute, and we haven't been getting a movement at the point of attack. Go look at the Tampa Bay game in those kind of situations. Now, Vita Vea is a much better player than Gaines, but Gaines' bread and butter is being a run defending defensive tackle who can give you a moderate amount of pass rush here and there too.
Yeah. Speaking of our interior offensive line, Jesse Dunn, thank you for the $10 super chat. Mary, love, kill, Blythe, Haynes, Gabe Jackson.
I love how
What
you
do you
put
what do you
love in
think?
there instead of F. Mary Love Kill. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and ooh, my God, that's a tough one, buddy. Okay, I guess I'll marry Lord, this is a weird question. I'll marry Blythe. I'll love on Gabe Jackson, and I'll kill Fail Haynes for sacrificial purposes.
I'm actually gonna go Mary Haynes. Haynes is the one guy who I think has a chance to be good, and
Mhm.
he's young. He can get better.
There we go.
I'll love Blythe because he's good in some areas. And yeah, Gabe Jackson, I'm getting out of here because
You can put the old man to you guys gotta put the old man out on the ice float. Is that what you're doing there?
yeah, I mean I kind of
He's
feel
had
bad
his
about it, but
time.
then again I don't.
He's had his run, Brendan. He had a good life.
Yeah. I
He's
don't
gonna
think
death
that
let it be said, folks. Brendan just death paneled Gabe Jackson.
yeah. I think that guard rotation thing lasted about 2 weeks, and now it's like, okay, I know Haynes didn't play well in this last game, but just let him stay out there every snap for a while and see how it goes.
I would tend to agree with you. There's the fluctuations in their scores with PFF, but you know what Jackson is. I don't think he's their plan to have him beyond this season. You don't know if that's the case with Haynes. I would like to see a more of a run with Haynes as well.
Right. So, all right. So that's the defensive front here for the Rams. Like you said, Wagner still having a pretty good year. There are some nice pieces on this Rams defense, like Troy Hill is still their number 2 corner, I believe. He's always been a generally pretty good player, I think.
Yeah, he's been
Um,
good for them. He doesn't play well for anybody else. As he went to Cleveland, they're like, ugh, and they sent him right back out to the Rams. But he does good for
yeah.
them.
I believe he's another guy who plays outside until they go nickel, and then he plays nickel.
Yes, he's at his best in the nickel, I'd argue. If you got him playing
Right.
outside, you can attack him outside.
Right. And Taylor Rapp seems like he's become a pretty good player in this league. A lot of Huskies on this Rams team. I don't like it.
I know. I hate why was there fascination? Like, let our Seahawks pick those guys. You stay off of them. The Cardinals are kind of the same way, aren't they? Don't they have a couple guys too, Husky guys on that
Byron
team?
Murphy, Buda Baker.
Yeah. So
I
it's
think that's it. But
yeah,
yeah,
they do get caught up with it. But yeah, no, they've got some interesting guys in the secondary there with those slot wise that he can hold up there. You're gonna have a matchup with DK and Ramsey. That's been a fun one over the years, Brendan, of course, because those guys go back and forth, and it
mhm,
tends to give as good as they get. It feels like a little bit. Um, I think it's also been interesting. They've had not much of a development. I think this is one that I think you were kind of in the same place. I forget where you were at with it, but I think you were in the same place I was, where we neither of us really loved up Terrell Lewis coming out. I don't believe of
mhm.
Alabama, and he was the really like thin-legged rusher, edge rusher that came out of there, and we were looking at him for our Hawks. I don't know if we were necessarily at that time, but I wasn't really high on him
Mm.
at the time. He's
Oh,
not
I
doing a lot.
remember this guy. The 2020, that was the COVID draft.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay. I think I
exactly.
do remember him now. It's such a generic name. I feel like there might
I
be
know
80
it's
Terrell
there's
Lewises in the league, but I think I
yep.
remember this guy.
Nothing specific with him, but one sack on the year. That's the guy that they hoped, I'm sure, that in their best case outlook when they draft that guy, I think it's relatively as high as they did, second or third round, that they looked at him as a guy that was going to be able to then take over for Vaughn this year, and then, okay, he'll take that step. And like Van Jefferson, where they're hoping that these young guys take that step to overcome these losses they have, and it just hasn't occurred.
What is your opinion of Jalen Ramsey this year? Because I feel like he's not playing that well. I'm not impressed every time I see him, but PFF still likes him a lot. So, what's your take there?
I mean, I think when he starts doing the traveling stuff, it's that stuff. So I'm very anti that stuff anyway. So you see him in a game like the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's traveling around with Travis Kelsey, and they got him in the slot against Kelsey, and then Kelsey's smoking him, and people were like, "Well, that's an indicator that it's not a good look." But I don't want to put an outside corner in the slot. A lot of just for that reason alone, you see those kind of situations occur. I do think he's not playing at his best. I do think that as well, he's going to benefit a little bit in the way that Richard Sherman got a benefit in 2019 with the 49ers, where Richard still played really solid ball that year, but he was the top graded corner in the league at that time. Why? Because teams didn't go after him, not necessarily because of the fear aspect, which was still there to a smaller degree than it once had been, but because the other side of the 49ers secondary, the other corner over there, was very vulnerable and you could go after him and attack him. And there were other places on the field that you could go after and attack on that defense, or you'd want to go attack rather than that. And so I think that's a little bit more with Jalen there, is that his reps probably still carrying him forward, but teams don't test him as much. Your grades are going to look better, I think, when you don't get tested. When there's truly not a ball thrown, I think it's easier for the grade to work in your favor, even if there's a little bit of separation from the receiver as PFF's tracking it and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen had no problem going after him week 1. I remember that.
No, but I don't think a lot of quarterbacks have that same kind of moxie to throw it in that direction. And I can't blame him, Brendan. If you look at this secondary, as much as you rightfully did speak about Murphy and or not Murphy, but Rapp and the steps that he's taken forward. Who's the guy that takes the ball away in the secondary outside of Ramsey? I know Nick Scott's got 2 interceptions from the safety position, but then the only other 2 guys, there's only 3 other guys that got interceptions on this team. Cody Durant, it looks like Terrell Lewis, the guy I just mentioned, has 1, and Troy Hill has 1. So no one else is taking away the ball. At least Jalen Ramsey, you're risking him intercepting it. I think it's a little bit of like Tariq Woolen. Teams know that they could go after Woolen and probably get some yards against him right now as a rookie, but there's also this high probability of him potentially intercepting you. So is that worth that? Is that worth it? Versus going the other direction where you think you can maybe pick on a guy like, let's say, Mike Jackson, who's not going to be the same kind of threat to do that.
You think Ramsey follows DK in this game?
Yeah. There's no way that they're going to want to have DK Metcalf on Troy Hill on the outside. Hill's a slot corner. He's in the past when he was at his best, Brendan, they had him as only a slot corner. They had the Darius Williams guy, I think it was on the outside, along with Ramsey, and then Hill was the inside slot. So they're doing that from necessity, not because it's like Hill's just so awesome at playing on the outside when they're doing that. If they're risking that, you're not risking DK run. He will smoke him 5 yards off the line of scrimmage. He's gone.
Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99 PFF stat. NO game average depth of target. Yeah, New Orleans game. Average depth of target for LA's defense was worst around the 7 to 15 yards, specifically targeting Troy Hill, Kendrick, and Ernest Jones. So that intermediate area. Okay.
Well, this is also a bit of what they build in their scheme. Every scheme is going to have its place that you can attack. No scheme is perfect in that it covers everything up all across the field. And this is a great stat, Kevin, by the way. But with our defense, what we choose to do is we want to cover up the depth of the big hole money shots. And we do so then the short stuff. We leave that kind of more opened up so we'll let you dink and dunk us. With what the Rams do is they have an oddity where they're able to get the depth with like cover 2 shell looks and then drop into cover 2 shell, but then they'll still bring at times some blitzes and some pressure on the front. So they still will generate pressure, but then protect against the deep ball, which then leaves you open usually on the short and intermediate stuff. And so this is again why the Niners have had the success. They use the outside runs. They have a guy in Garoppolo whose whole game is built around what? The short and intermediate throws. And so that's again why football's a matchup game. This is why those teams have had success, or why the Niners have had that kind of success attacking. That's why I'm expecting us to have more success offensively than we've had, because of the fact we have a guy in Geno Smith who also has that in kind of his bread and butter in his game, being the short and intermediate stuff.
Yeah, not a lot of shots down the field from Geno lately.
And I wish they would a little bit more. You got a guy like DK Metcalf, Brendan. I think that there's got to be a little bit of a commitment level here with him of we've got to take at least 1 or 2 shots a game down the field. I understand he gets a lot of double teams, and if he's going to get the safety over the top, bracketing, that I don't want Geno throwing into double coverage 50 yards down the field. I don't want that. But when we have gone deep, we've been pretty efficient with it, it feels like. It's been pretty good for us. It just doesn't seem like we commit as much to do it. And so I would like to see more of it. DK Metcalf's maybe one of the best, if not the most best deep threat receiver you have in the entire NFL. Utilizing that skill set a little more would be nice. Though I think, again, Brendan, a lot of that gets taken away because of the double teams. Second, he starts running that 9 route. That safety's like, he's going to get over there and help out his corner brother. I'm going, I got you, bro. I got you.
Yeah, building some kind of consistent running game would probably help bring that safety up and maybe force them out of that stuff.
Agreed.
I don't know. I mean, I know our running game isn't terrible, but we do have that really low success rate for run blocking, which means they're an inconsistent run team. So I feel like if we can run the ball a little bit better, that'll get the safety off of Metcalf.
Agreed. I mean, that was the thing with Russ there when you were having him with the problems in the cover 2 looks, and you had both your guys getting double deep. they could run into those cover 2 looks because they didn't need the extra safety in the box to help in the run game. And so, yes, if you can generate that need, then you can open that back up.
Yeah. But in this game, if they have Ramsey following Metcalf, I don't know if they're going to commit a safety to him that often because you don't want to commit your best corner or your number one corner and a safety to the one guy. What I usually see teams do in those situations is they'll commit their number two corner to the other team's best receiver and then send the double. You usually don't see a team go, we're going to put our number one, especially a guy like Jalen Ramsey, who is supposedly still good, on this guy, and we're going to have the safety. So it feels like one or the other.
I think your point is most especially true in this game because of the lackluster guys you have along the rest of the board defensively. So you don't feel like you can, I mean, we did it when we were at full strength defensively, double the guy last week, and it upended our whole defense supposedly. So, if you've got a guy who can travel with DK and you can then maybe afford to provide one extra defender for the run game to help other people out because you're weakened along all of the fronts in that realm, that probably makes more sense than leaning over and doubling DK. But you are right. Historically speaking, it's been one-on-one when those two guys go up against each other. It's not a lot of double teams.
And let's remember, last year, Metcalf, playing injured, was getting open all day on Ramsey. He had no problem getting open on Ramsey. Wilson just famously did not do a good job getting him the ball, even though Lockett was out for that game with COVID. So
I had so many Rams fans like, he locked Metcalf down, locked him down. He put the clamps on him, man. He clamped him up, bro. What happened, man? What happened to your guy DK? I'm like, he was open. Did you guys see? Like, 'cause remember they showed in the telecast during the game a cut up of DK breaking open where he's like hand up and Russell's just missing him and he's ignoring him and he's like, I'm here, jumping up and down like, come on, throw it.
Right. R. Sanchez, thank you for the $2. Do we cut Jones? I'm assuming this is Josh Jones. Is he our only Jones? Because Sydney's gone.
Yeah, that would be our only Jones at that point. You're right on that.
Yeah. You go first. I don't know.
No, I don't believe you do. The reasoning behind this, I would believe, is because of the fact that, he's really insurance for if Ryan Neal has the injuries to continue to, not get better, or it gets even worse, or it gets something knocks him out. I think that some of it's going to depend on what they see from the guy in the practice field. But the issue would come into play on if you're cutting him at that point and then you lose Ryan Neal, you've got a huge liability at strong safety and coverage, which I mean, maybe that's not the biggest deal because at the end of the day, Brendan, teams aren't going to, like Tampa Bay shown, like Oakland showed or Las Vegas showed last week. If they can run the ball on you, they're not going to pass. It's kind of the opposite of what we've seen against our defenses in recent years when they've been bad. Teams will just throw, but won't go back to the run because they're having so much success throwing the ball. And now it's sort of the inverse of this a little bit, where teams are like, well, let's just run the ball because we can be successful with this if we just stay with this all day. But I don't think so. I think this is to get you an extra man on deck, somebody else to reinforce the ranks, a little bit of the cavalry. Let's bring them on in. That's all this really is more than to upgrade over Jones. I think that last tackle especially freaked him out. That missed tackle at the end on the back breaking run, because Hurt brought it up in his press conference. And so I think I heard Carroll talk about it too. So that was one that they definitely were like, he's got to make that tackle there. He's got to come up there. He can't whiff like that. He's got to, even just comes up and holds on for dear life.
Yeah, and also, just because we picked up Abram doesn't mean he's going to be ready to go this week. I will also say that.
True.
He could be a scratch just because he won't know what he's doing yet because he just got here. So you might have to live one more week with the Josh Jones experience.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Sounds like Ryan Neal's playing though, so it may be minimized.
That's true. Josh Jones, he was the training camp superstar too.
He was, man. They loved enough of what I saw to move off from Blair. I mean, that's your choice really between Blair and Jones, is that you liked more of what you were seeing from Jones right now beyond the draft pedigree of Marquise Blair. But it's been one thing that I've wondered about throughout the course of this year as to whether or not if they could go back and make that decision again, if they would make the same choice.
Yeah. I think that if we do cut Josh Jones, it won't be until maybe we get to see Abram in a couple games. So it'll be probably later in December. And at that point, you might just say, keep him around for depth because apparently, he's fairly good in coverage.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you're going to want to see what you first have in in Abram before you release him. And we are winding down to the part of the schedule where there's only so many games left here. I mean, we are in the back portion, the home stretch, so to speak, just about. So I think it just makes more sense. Just hold on to him. You probably go one less at another point in the roster somewhere. And maybe one guy's active or not active game day. It's like he'll be one of those two guys will be one of those two on that side of it.
Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $5. MJ still playing good, but I want to see Trey Brown play the nickel and Kobe on his natural outside. 2 ball hawks on the outside and Diggs in the back. Yeah, a lot of talk lately about mixing and matching the secondary to get the best players out there in the best possible position. Where do you stand right now, Brandon? What do you got?
Well, I do believe that the Trey Brown to the nickel thing, I understand in that he has the size and he has the natural athletic and short area burst that would work normally conventionally very well within playing slot. But I don't think that that's what his skill set bears out at its best to. Like when you go beyond those peripherals with him, size, short area burst, he's never played slot. That's not his real game. He's an outside guy, really, first and foremost, throughout his time in college. And so I don't want to really, a guy coming off an injury like that, move him into a new position for the first time, well past into this part of the year at this point. I don't think that I want to do that. I'm more in favor of saying Trey Brown, Mike Jackson. You can mix that on the outside, let those guys battle out. If you want to flex out a couple of rotational snaps between those guys, fine. Kobe Bryant's got 4 forced fumbles. He's also got 2 forced fumbles that were called back, I believe, because of no whistle this last week or penalty. He's also had 2 interceptions that have been called back because of penalty. Yeah, he's getting turnovers from the slot. He's generating those turnovers from in there just nicely. He doesn't have to be on the outside to get it done. And so I would be more about putting Trey on the outside. I think Trey's future is on the outside in this league. I think Kobe's is as well. It puts us into a conundrum. But, it doesn't change the fact that Kobe's doing, I think, just good enough. And I think he's coming along at this point in the slot. It's not game breaking, but he's not getting attacked or picked on either.
He's gotten picked on in a couple games, but this last game he was fine. And, these NFL refs just don't want him to succeed. They've taken away 2 interceptions from him and now the forced fumble. So they just don't want to see the man succeed.
No, they don't. I mean, and he should have 6 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions on the season so far. I mean, to me, that's just phenomenal for what he's doing out of the slot. Yeah. And so, he's had some hard moments. I think he's gotten better though as the years gone along. And I think in recent weeks, I can't remember a time where it's like snap after snap that he's just getting crushed.
Yeah. So one question I had for you about this kind of topic, you mentioned a couple of those plays against the Raiders where we had the double team on Devontae Adams, but the corner was still playing like 10 yards off.
Yeah.
I think it was mostly Jackson. Maybe it was Kobe once or twice. Mostly Jackson. Do you think that's a player thing or a coaching thing? Who do you put that on?
I put it on a coaching thing. It comes out of I think it's born out of the fact that it goes against when Carroll's got things that go against what he wants to do defensively, and he's kind of being driven to do them anyway. He'll begrudgingly do them, but he's always got 1 foot in the lake, 1 foot on the land. And what I mean by that is that he'll commit to double teaming Devontae Adams, but then he's still going to have his corners playing off coverage and dropping into a bail technique cover 3 a lot of the time, which, as I've said, that does neutralize the double team because you're putting both of the 2 defenders in the same place, which is not exactly the same place that the receiver is heading towards, specifically on the in-cutting routes, slant routes, and as we saw so many times with Devontae Adams last week, the out-cutting route, specifically on 3rd down. I don't like it, but that's maybe I'm wrong on this, Brendan. I'm not saying I know all on it. I'm just my guess to the situation, but it would appear to me it's that where Carroll goes, well, I don't want to bring him up into press. And then that's going to force my safety over a couple steps early to get to that side because he's going to feel I have to get over there. And then he's going to have to leave his center field duties in the other side of the field that he's also responsible for in that play. I don't like that. I'd like having at least the corner giving him a little bit of a feeling of comfortableness in that dropping off. And if we give up a couple yard catch, so what? We give up a couple yard catch. I kind of think it goes just like that. But the coaches go, but let's at least get a double on Devontae. So if he does a double move on our guy, like Devontae does that great, right? And he gets him going one way and then he's up on the other one. We'll at least then have Diggs there and double coverage at that point. But it's very rudimentary. Right. It's very simplistic. And it frankly doesn't really do what you want a double team to do, which is really take the player away and force somebody else on the other team to beat you.
Yeah, I mean that philosophy is fine, but it's 3rd and 2. Like one of those plays, it was
I
third and
know.
two.
Yeah,
So
you're right. I mean, there was another one's like 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, I think. And it's you're not playing to the sticks. You're playing to that cover three drop, and it's again off coverage bail technique. So it means I'm off coverage, folks, 9-10 yards, and then I'm going to drop 2 to 3 more steps post snap into the bail technique as I turn my butt to the sideline. That's you end up 13 yards off the line of scrimmage post snap before the receiver's done anything. And now you've got to then react to that receiver. And if he's doing something quick in front of you, you got a lot of ground to cover to get your butt up there to try to go and make a play. And it puts the guy like Mike Jackson last week in a position of really not being able to win there. He's just got to kind of, unless he route reads it, unless he reads something in Devontae Adams' technique that shows him it's going to, which we know Devontae's not giving you any little, tips as far as
right.
that goes. He's not letting you know what he's doing. So yeah, it drives me crazy, but we don't double guys. Go through our history here, Brendan. How often can you remember Pete Carroll doubling receivers in games? Doesn't happen very often, has it?
No, no, it hasn't.
It's not something he likes to do. It goes against what he wants to do. And if it goes against what he wants to do, he kind of is like the kicking, screaming toddler that's just going to flail and throw it. Like he'll do it, but it's not going to be the way you want it done. It's like adopting the cover two shell. We've adopted the cover two shell, but we're not bringing any of the blitz concepts to play. We're not bringing any of the pressure looks that are the backbone in a lot of ways of this defense, just in certain respects. It's strange.
Yeah. So there's no great answer right now. We're going to have possibly 3 really nice outside corners, and you can only have 2 of them on the field at once. And it's not a bad problem to have, though. It's
No.
the best kind of problem to have. But for the moment, it is a problem because we don't really have a pure slot.
No. And that's something that's going to have to be addressed into the offseason, unfortunately. But it is a good problem. These are all young guys. These are all cheap guys on rookie deals with a couple more years ahead of them on that timeline of things. And that's a benefit to this team. So you can stack up other positions, pay money in other positions, don't have to worry about reinforcing the ranks as much, and go to other places. So it will be a helpful problem for us to have into the future. But right now it's a bit of a head scratcher because you do have the problems there, or worries a little bit with the slot.
R. Sanchez, thank you for the $5. Why has Pete, a defensive guru, had so much trouble evaluating talent before this last draft? A couple different elements to this one, but what do you think, Brandon?
Well, I think Pete's best defensive evaluating happened when he first came into this league and had a very keen understanding of the players he was bringing on board, and having recruited them in college. I think that it's been pretty shoddy outside of that, and that even your successes during that period of time had a little bit of an asterisk to them. In Frank Clark's case, a guy that you got a first and a second round pick for down the road and had a 13 sack year for you and was reasonably productive, didn't play the run particularly well. And that was kind of his top end, but he was a good pick. That was one that you liked. Jaron Reed, though, outside of a 1 year of a 9.5 sacks, he was okay, decent. And then there's some misses in there. Malik McDowell, it's kind of like there's all different reasons on him, Brendan, for like the misses. Like Malik McDowell's got the freakishness, but you knew he didn't have what it took upstairs to get it done. He failed all of the pre-combine interviews. You could see that train coming down the tracks. LJ Collier had no talent to be picked to where he was picked, but something, Pete likes the bully guys. Pete likes the guys who are kind of, I'm going to force my will on you a little bit. And he gets caught up in like little elements of guys' games, I think, and then sort of like overlooks the other stuff of those guys' games, especially on some of these high-end guys. And he's like, yeah, but I got this one thing to work with that I can really utilize in my defense. And he sort of just gets lost of the other stuff a little bit. And you've got to, I think, when you look at these prospects, look all the way around and what they do. Yes, and they've said this, Brendan, we want to look at what a guy can do, not concentrate on what a guy can't do. But when you're evaluating whether to bring a guy in, that's once you have a guy in the building. When you're evaluating the guy to come into the building, you need to then concentrate on what he can't do also as well, with equal force and measure.
Right. Since Pete's been here, most of our success with defensive linemen has been in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think the only defensive lineman he ever really hit on was Frank Clark, right?
I think unless you want to say Jaron Reed, which I don't think is a major hit, I think it's an okay one. And Jaron, a lot like Frank Clark, Jaron got into that. I'm just going to go after the passer, and I'm not going to play the run game for a couple of years there. So yeah, you got some guy that could give you some juice as far as a pass rusher, but it was at the cost of what he could do as far as a run stuffer goes. So and it's weird with both those two guys in Clark case and in Jaron Reed's case, they were both run stuffers coming out of college to a degree who need to develop more of their pass rush, but they sort of just went the other way with it. But yeah, he's never been a great guy at locating the talent, and let's just call it, never been the greatest guy at necessarily developing the talent beyond. I mean, look at Bruce Irvin. Bruce Irvin came in with 8 sacks his first year. I think he had 8 sacks next year. I think he was always right around that same level of things. And he's a really good player, very useful player, but never are you seeing that steps going forward in development on the defensive line. Certainly in the secondary, yes, Carroll can absolutely get guys along in that realm of things, but that is the one spot defensive, as far as defensive lineman goes, that, and this is with Hurt too, who got a promotion here, despite not having a little bit of that development go on from the defensive line recently. That's, that does remain a bit of a question mark.
Right. So honestly, I think we've done a pretty good job covering all there is to say about these Rams. There's not a whole lot to talk about. It's a very stripped down roster. It's a very stripped down team. Their best player left might be Bobby Wagner. He might be the best player who's actually playing on Sunday.
Agreed. And probably by a pretty good margin. Stephen Bobby, as old as Bobby is, like whoever's number 2, it's probably still a decent track behind him, so he's probably the only, would you say? Yeah, he's probably the only Pro Bowler out on that field for the Rams, defensively speaking.
I mean, it depends on what you think of Ramsey, and PFF loves
he's
him,
up there.
but
yeah, he'll go to the pros. So that's your 2 guys. I guess Ramsey would maybe be still considered the best de facto, but Bobby's had a really good year, and PFF likes him too. So you're right. Usually we could go into this matchup a little bit more. It's a little bit of just, they have guys that are not really NFL caliber players they're going to be putting out on the football field. You are not saying the same about your guys. We have positions we need to address. We have positional groups we need to address this offseason and get better. But they are NFL guys. They're, those guys will probably be on an NFL roster. If not here, it's not, I don't think that the Rams are playing with guys that necessarily would be on NFL rosters just anywhere else with some of the guys you're going to get to go across in this game. So it's all there for our taking, and it really does go beyond, I think, what we normally do in trying to analyze this and really break down the matchups with it. There's the schematic matchups, offense and defensively, but there's not really the player matchups because you do have the advantages in this game by a massive margin.
Yeah, it would not be off the mark to say offensively, at least, you are playing the Rams practice squad. This feels like a practice squad game. It feels like a preseason game.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% there. This is very much, and you're running with your starters, and they're like, well, we're, they're running their 4th preseason game, and you're going out with your starters the whole game. I guess that's the equivalent, Brendan. And if that's the case, it's like, how do you not look at that situation and go, okay, we should win by at least 10 points, even this team that isn't necessarily, played its best in the last 2 weeks, like that should still be a game. You go, okay, yeah, but come on, they're way down. They're pulling guys off the street kind of thing almost.
Right. So with all that being said, last week the Rams played the Chiefs, and in theory that's a game the Chiefs should win by 60 points, right? Like there's just nothing going on. But the Chiefs just kind of showed up, went up early, and then just shut it down. They were like, okay, let's get up by double digits, and there's no way the Rams are going to be able to come back. So let's just take it easy, pump the brakes, and just get out of here with this win. I kind of feel like the Seahawks might end up doing something somewhat similar, where they just kind of pick up a couple of touchdowns, maybe a couple field goals, and then just go, okay, let's just get out of here. What do you think?
I think it certainly is possible. And the team's shown an ability to get up on teams and kind of put them away down slowly in certain games this year. So I don't think it's the worst of pathways for them to go in this one. And I think the Chiefs also are, the Chiefs are in that sort of cruise control mode right now where it's hitting on all gears. It's all kind of hitting right. They're going through their schedule. You're playing a Rams team. You've been kind of rolling along. You probably drop your guard just a tiny bit in that game a little bit too with that. I think the Hawks coming off 2 straight losses like they have, and now, where things are kind of in question a little bit, especially losing the game they would, and especially the defense having the performance they did. I think that does kind of put a little bit more of your guys on point and gets them on their toes a little bit more for a game like this that might normally be a game that you do have a little bit of dropping your guard naturally just because of the state the Rams are in. So I think that's a thing that maybe works in our favor here a little better because of that. But that's also like what I was saying about the opponents they've had, Brendan, where you look at that thing, and if there's 3 tiers in the NFL and there's the garbage tier at tier 3, they've not played really a garbage tier team, a team that's truly, I think, bottom of the barrel. And maybe the Saints, maybe the Falcons, but again, those are teams that are going to end up with 6, 7 wins on the year. And
Cardinals.
the Cardinals, but again, like those two teams, team is going to probably end up at the end of the year with 5, 6, 7 wins, maybe, when it all settles out.
I mean, not according to Kyler. Kyler said they're all effed up right now. Remember the press conference?
I know that's getting dysfunctional, isn't it? Boy, oh boy. Woo!
What did he
Patrick
say?
Peterson. Did you hear the Patrick Peterson bite too?
Yeah, I heard that one.
He's he cares about himself. Like, ooh, like that confirms what everybody thought. Like in a year, Patrick Peterson say it's like that's not just some guy saying it. It's like,
is that as bad as the Russell contract? Like, it seems like him becoming a really good NFL quarterback is about as hopeless.
I think it is. I think it's not as bad because you at least have the resources from an Arizona standpoint to get this thing figured out. Like you have the draft picks at least. Your cap situation, though it's not in the greatest place, it's not annihilated a little bit. I think like Wilson's will when that starts really kind of clicking in, but it's bad. And I kind of revel in the fact these quarterbacks, these contracts they were given this offseason and the guys moving around as they were, that it hasn't worked out. Because as you know, one of the things I'd like to see NFL move towards is a little bit less away from this quarterback diva thing and them commanding so much of the cap and them restricting the rest of what the defense can do because they're going to hold the team hostage with their salary demands, making more than double that of the second player on the roster. I find it to be not right. It doesn't, I don't think it helps teams. I don't think it's better for the NFL that it works that way. And I think that there's value to be had. It's like Moneyball. I do think there's going to be value to be had in looking for those quarterbacks like we've done with Geno here a little bit that are making significantly less, but get you very close to the same kind of play. Sometimes, in this case with Kyler and Geno, he's far outplaying Kyler Murray this year in that contract. But it was you and I both knew the moment it was signed, we were laughing our butts off about it because we go, there's no way this is a good signing. This is absolutely him forcing them saying, I've earned this. And them feeling like they're made it out of fear because they were scared of what they were going to have to do to go find another quarterback if they moved off of him. And so by fear, they made that choice. And that's what happens is you make choices out of fear, desperation, you're going to tend to make a bad choice. And that's just what the Cardinals did.
Well, let's take a look at it. Who's up for a contract this offseason? It's Burrow. It feels like they're going to give him whatever he wants.
He'll get whatever he wants. They'll pay him the house. I mean, that's a cheap organization, but they'll find a way with it.
Tua, kind of interesting there because he can't stay healthy, but he's having a dominant season.
Can't they just activate the 5th-year option with him? Because like he's past 3 years, but he's still on the rookie first-round contract, right?
Yeah, but so is Burrow, and they're not going to do that with Burrow. I guess
Burrow's going to get paid, but I don't think Tua gets paid. He's going to have to prove it another year.
Herbert's got to get paid, right?
Herbert gets paid, and Sean Payton goes there at the same time.
Jalen Hurts, he probably, I don't think this problem is going away, man.
Do the Eagles give Jalen Hurts $40 million?
Oh, 40 has got to be the low point. Jalen Hurts is better right now than Kyler ever was, and Kyler got 50.
God, to give Jalen Hurts $45-50 million. I mean, and Howie Roseman has run that thing so well right now and has built up such a good team. It's another team like the Ravens. If I'm the Eagles, I'd love to see the Eagles have like what I think the guts the Ravens will to be able to say, okay, we'll move on from Lamar. We'll get a first-round pick. We'll go get Anthony Richardson out of Florida. Call it a day. And that you see the Eagles do the same thing where they're like, well, let's work with Hurts before. Let's go get I don't think they will, because again, this is where teams get where they're just like, well, we got to pay him now. He's up. This is what you have to do. This is what we have to do. This is what the book says you got to do. So let's do it. But do you pay Hurts $50 million? I mean, oh, come on, Brandon. Jalen Hurts $50 million.
I don't think so. I would do it for Burrow.
Yeah, Burrow all day, but that's two different quarterbacks. Burrow's like a top 5 quarterback. There's no universe that exists where Hurts is a top 5 quarterback. Hurts is projected to throw for 3,900 yards. Like in this league with 17-game season, Brendan, he's not even going to crack 4,000 yards passing. And it's great what he's doing with the running game, but he runs like a running back. Like he's also in that Lamar stage of like one bad hit from an angle he doesn't see because he's out there running his tail off all the time because he can't throw as well. So he's got to manufacture the yards with his legs. Boy, I do not like doing that. I do not like
Right.
it.
Yeah, but the point is, it's not going to stop anytime soon. Burrow might get 60.
He
Like the
might.
cap is going up.
I don't think the Bengals give him 60. But see,
Mm,
the Bengals are so cheap about it. They'll come to him and they'll be like, look, if you're going to be like hardball with us on that, we'll be hardball with you on that. They're that kind of organization that'll be like, we'll push you out to the fifth year option. We'll franchise you twice. You're still currently at that point then 4 years away from reaching free agency. So why don't you get your number into more of a realistic place? And that's just the kind of ownership group that they run out there. They don't,
what about Herbert?
Herbert's, yeah. Herbert absolutely could demand that price and should get it. Honestly, I mean, he's people are not going to. It's weird. He's got his people that really like him and the people that really hate him, and there's no in between with Herbert out there, And I see a lot of back and forth with him. But you look at the last couple of years, and I think the injury situation there, the lack of imagination offensively and how to use him right with all those short throws and throwing behind the line of scrimmage. You give him a Sean Payton talent. I'll go give him 55. I don't know about full 60, but I'll definitely throw him the 55, which is, and a lot of the guaranteed money within that.
Yeah, I think that's what it's going to take. I think that's where this is going.
Yeah, I think he's
Hmm.
worth it.
I've said this a few times in the offseason. I was hoping this QB class would inject so much QB talent into the NFL that it would eventually cause an effect where teams didn't have to let quarterbacks hold them hostage, but it didn't happen. This class is maybe not even an average QB class.
No, I mean, it's probably shaping out to average at best, I guess. Maybe average it too by quantity over quality because there just is so many guys. But you definitely it's been disappointing that you've gotten to see these guys you hoped would take the step forward, and most of them have kind of maybe not a full step back, but have inched a little bit backwards for the most part across the line. And that's been, yeah, I'm with you. I'm disappointed as well. It was really in our best benefit from a variety of different reasons. Even if we didn't want to take a quarterback, these guys were more bowling out than they have been.
Right. So back to this Rams game. Um, with what I just said in mind, what are you seeing in terms of like a score here? Because I already said I kind of feel like this is going to be a game where you just do enough to get the game over with and you shut it down a little bit.
Uh, yeah, I agree. I think that they're going to definitely do what they can to stop the run and do it. They're going to take a lot of notes from what Tampa Bay and the Raiders did to stop our running game and try to implement that. And I think that that's going to press Gino to throw a little bit, especially early on. I do think though that we put up a darn near 30 points in this game, something close to it. I do think he's going to kind of slice up that defense. I think he's well built to go after that defense. And so I do think we get to 30 points in this game, maybe not much past that. I do think we get up early to your point on that, but I think we're able to kind of just consistently keep moving the ball and keep generating points throughout. Maybe it's not touchdowns every turn, but touchdown here, field goal, touchdown, field goal. You end up though, I think somewhere around the realm of probably 30. I'm going to go 30-13.
Okay, I'm going to say 24-10.
All right.
Just nice business like go in, get up early, and then just
All right.
turn it off.
I'm with
You
it,
don't need
man.
to put a bunch of stuff on tape. You don't need to show these other teams what you're doing. You don't need to bust out the trick plays. You don't need to do none of that. Just get in, get the win, and get out of that stupid stadium that they knocked down Hollywood Park for.
Yeah, agreed. It's a take care of business game. It doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be beautiful, doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to execute every turn. You don't have to play flawless from a penalty standpoint. All you got to do is be the better, more talented team out there and execute from that standpoint. Out execute this Rams team, which should be easier to do because they just don't have the dogs to get it done this particular week. And it really is the bottom line on this game. And it's really there's not been a game this year that's been like this. Even with all the injuries on some of these matchups that have been this bottom line of it's really just about you just coming reasonably to play, just not completely coming to is there a football game today? One of those kind of games where your guys look like they're going through the motions. Absent that, you win this game.
And one thing that I think is going to happen here is that we're really going to learn how much Wilson's game was not suited for this Rams defense because I think that in this game you're going to see Gino's game like even in the recent couple of years, even when Wilson was playing great, there's this huge difference in the way those two guys can play, and I think you're going to see the effect of that in this one. That's going to be the big difference here. Because if we're being honest, one of the main reasons why you've struggled against the Rams is Wilson didn't play well against them. And We all remember that weird fever dream moment last year when Wilson was doing nothing against the Rams, came out with that mallet finger, and then Geno went out there and immediately went 99 yards down the field for a touchdown. It was one of the strangest moments of my life as a Seahawks fan.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why it happened. It didn't just happen randomly.
No, it's a great point. And the moment that felt random, the moment it was like, well, I guess Geno broken clock twice a day, something's gonna be right. Well, just they weren't ready for him, or we thought at the time we thought, well, maybe it's because they were just so prepared for Russ with what he did with the scrambling and holding the ball, and Geno's coming in just executing the offense. It just completely threw him off. But instead, what we've seen in retrospect is, in fact, Geno is a good enough guy to execute this offense. He's playing like one of the better quarterbacks in this league this year. Certainly top 10, might even sneak into that top 5 state of things here when it's all said and done. We look at statistically where he was at across the board. And that guy's going to be able to go after this kind of defense. As I said, his strength is the Rams' weakness. Russell's strength to throw it deep was going into the teeth of the Rams defense because, like I said, they're going to run that cover 2 stuff. They're at the front of that cover 2 stuff and stopping Russ. But then they're also getting pressure on the front end, which is then flushing and forcing Russ to speed up his clock so he can't get to the deep stuff, which then makes him throw the ball away or look frenetic or look confused. That's why it was a bad matchup for him prior. But you're going to the opposite end now of the scale here with Geno and what he does. And that should bring the benefits in this game and in the second game of the season too.
And I think that's going to do it for the show. We went a little shorter than usual because, well, these Rams are a little shorter than usual.
little baby goats this week, folks. That's all we got. They're not full on Rams, just little baby little baby goats.
Yeah. Is this current Rams roster worse than the Jeff Fisher Rams at any point?
Yeah, I would say so. With no Donald there, and I mean they had some guys at least through the years, defensive line wise, Chris Longs and Brockers and linebackers. Remember they had a couple guys linebacker that came through that were pretty Ogletree that came through that was pretty decent. So they had usually at least defensively speaking, he had stuff put together from that standpoint. I mean, maybe offensively you could say because the Fisher team's lines were kind of dodgy. Not a lot there as far as receivers, I think, at that time. But certainly, it's probably right on par with.
Yeah. Didn't the Rams have De Niro? What was his name? De Niro Alexander, the guy who kept tearing his ACLs.
Oh yeah, yes, I do remember that guy.
One year with Bradford.
Yeah, tore them both, I think, a couple times.
Yeah,
on both those legs.
Just not meant to play football.
No, sometimes there's just those signs God hits you with where it's like you are not son going to do that. We saw Cedro Procise go through this, where your body's just going to turn into glass once you reach the NFL.
Right. All right, guys. So that'll be it for the show tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We had over 200 people here most of the night. We obviously have the football action this weekend, and we will be doing this again here on Tuesday to talk about whatever transpires in this future game. Brandon, I want to thank you for coming out and doing this with me.
My pleasure, my brother.
And I want to thank everybody for coming out and watching us tonight. One little programming note: next week, the pregame for, I believe it's the Panthers game, is going to be on Wednesday instead. So just bump everything up a little bit. So we'll actually be going live back to back, which we did a couple times during the draft, but not a common occurrence here. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I think that's good. I should be going live on Twitch shortly here. If anybody wants to come watch, head on over there. And we got to say it.
Got to let them know.
We got to do it. Even though this is not a game that people are necessarily going to get super up on, even though this game seems like it might be a little bit of a cakewalk, we still got to let them know.
Got to let them know. There's still a chance here.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.